All right, welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. My guest today is Councilmember Ossé. She's a couple of things. One is he's the youngest member of the City Council, and we're going to talk about that because of some of the work that we're doing on mobile voting and other things that really overlap. But two, he's the sponsor of and really driving force behind a piece of legislation that I think is tremendously important. I've been waiting decades for someone to do this, and then all of a sudden one day I read an article and there you are. So let's just take it right up top. Why do you think that people who are renting apartments shouldn't be charged broker's fees?
For sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on.
At the end or at the beginning of the summer, I introduced a bill called the FAIR Act, which stands for Fairness in Apartment Rental Expenses Act. Many New Yorkers who may be listening, especially tenants who are looking for an apartment or have in the past, when you're undergoing this grueling process that is finding a new home within New York City, as a tenant, when you find an apartment on Street Easy, even through word of mouth with a friend, you are confronted with this broker fee on top of first month's rent, last month's rent, and a security deposit. And you have to pay this broker's fee to a broker that you've never met before, that you never negotiated a price with before, but a broker that is, getting free labor or a landlord's getting free labor out of this broker to help them find a new tenant. So, as a tenant in New York City or a prospective tenant in New York City, it's unfair that you have to pay this fee that can range from $2,000 to $3,000 to even more amount of money to just find an apartment to someone that you never negotiated a price with.
Right. I mean, if the average one bedroom in Manhattan now is close to $5,000. So it's a round number, $60,000 annual rent. So even at 15%, which is the lower range of the fee, we're still talking about almost $10,000. Who has 10 grand in extra cash to just throw at the broker? It's not for your first month's rent or your last month's rent. It's insane.
Right. I mean, people are going to have to and have been having to save multiple paychecks just to move into a new apartment. Now, when you're thinking of young people who are moving to the city, working class families, especially single mothers who are living paycheck to paycheck, it's rather difficult to save multiple paychecks just to move into a new apartment. And every other transaction that seems to exist within our society, if you order something, if you hire something, if you negotiate a price with someone, then you pay that price. But unfortunately, in New York City and also Boston, you are forced to pay this fee to someone that you've never met or hired and negotiated a price with. And that's simply unfair. And it's putting a strain on our already deeply problematic housing crisis here in New York.
Right. So I noticed that you did not include brokers who are doing the sale of apartments. And I imagine that's because the work that goes into it is quite different. How do you think about it?
Absolutely. I mean, you said it right there. I think the work is a bit more skilled, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of brokers who are selling apartments or homes really put some care into the work that they do, right? They're building client relationships. They're, selling the home to the prospective buyer. I found that in New York City, there's, a large amount of brokers who, are young people or people in general who see this as a, get rich quick scheme or get a check quick, because there's not a lot of work that goes into it when you are a bad broker. Now, I think brokers, still should exist, and they do exist in every other city in this country where, that does not exist without this type of bill. I hired a broker myself to find myself an apartment because it was rather difficult to do it in the traditional way. But just because I paid a broker doesn't mean anyone has to be forced to pay a broker. But I do believe that brokers that sell apartments and sell homes do provide a necessary service, and that's not something that I want to regulate with this bill.
So I wrote a column a few weeks ago in the Daily News endorsing your bill, and I got plenty of pushback, as you can imagine. And
Did you?
Yeah, from
what were you hearing?
Just a lot. It's interesting. I think because people in the real estate community now know me well enough to know that if they just sort of attacked me wholeheartedly, I would just publicly go right back at them.
Right.
So it's a lot more of like, well, you don't really understand. The job's much harder than you realize. And it's like, okay, so the job is what? You're opening the door, answering a few questions, and collecting an application, and then either you or the landlord is then doing a credit check, right? in the era before the internet, maybe you could see an argument that the broker provided some sort of convening function. But now when all the information is already available completely online and can be provided for free, I just didn't hear a single argument as to the service that the broker providing justifying A, the economic cost of this, and B, the social cost, simply because it does lead to less affordable housing and it does deter people who we want in the city from coming here.
And also, I mean, if the broker is providing that type of service and they're talking to the landlord about that service that they're providing, then the landlord should simply pay for those services, right? The tenant, should not have to be forced to pay the broker fee to someone that their landlord is getting a free, service from.
Right. I mean, let's do the math on it. So let's say that you pay someone $50 an hour so they can open the door, answer some questions, and collect applications, right? And let's say it's 50 hours of work, which seems completely way over, right? That's $2,500. And then the credit check's a couple $100 more, right? So the total cost to the landlord at most is a third of what people are paying in brokerage fees, probably more like a fifth or a sixth. So under your bill, would the landlord be able to pass those costs back on to the renter? How does that work?
So, I mean, there are multiple different scenarios that can take place, right? I think that many tenants and tenants that we've spoken to would be more than happy that if the broker did bake in if the landlord baked in the broker fee to the annual rent, a lot of tenants would be happy to pay that broker fee over a period of time rather than as an upfront cost, right? I think the barrier that truly exists for tenants is having to, again, save multiple paychecks just to move in. Just to move into an apartment in New York City is rather difficult. So in one scenario, people would rather pay that over a elongated period of time. Another scenario is that about 50% of tenants in New York City live in rent-regulated apartments. You cannot increase the rent or bake a fee into the rent of a rent stabilized apartment within New York City. And then the third thing is the market in terms of how rents work in New York City cannot change simply if a landlord wants to bake the broker fee into the rent. If a tenant is looking for an apartment that is $3,000 a month, and the landlord is now changing that rent to $3,500, that tenant's going to look somewhere else for an apartment, and that's something that we saw during COVID when we saw that rents fell. It's because the market is dictated by what the larger population of prospective tenants in New York City can pay.
And if you are the landlord, I understand that the broker on one hand provides a cost-free service to you. On the other hand, that is money arguably that could be either coming to you in the form of rent or just generally speaking is money that is kind of just it's like almost vanishing in thin air with no real tangible outcome. So what's the reaction been to the bill from landlords, from Rebney, and then from regular people?
Absolutely. So, this is the closest New York City has ever been to changing how we have our broker system set up. We have 29 sponsors in the city council sign on to this bill. That's a majority of sponsors within the city council. The chair of the committee in which this bill must come through, has told me that there's not enough time in the year for this bill to have a hearing, so it could even be spoken about. Rebney the Real Estate Board of New York has lobbied viciously against this bill and calling other members to not sign on to this bill, saying many different things that this bill doesn't do, but they're saying that it will do. So there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread about this bill straight from the get-go. It's received a lot of pushback, which has been unfortunate to see because this is, a piece of legislation within our city government that will tangibly benefit the lives of so many New Yorkers and prospective New Yorkers. But I've received a lot of pushback from it.
So you've got 29 co-sponsors, though. And if you have 35, then 34, then kind of regardless of a blockade by the committee chair, the bill goes to the floor for a vote.
Yes, for a hearing.
For a hearing.
Yes.
Okay. And then who decides? Is it the speaker then decides whether or not it can be voted on?
Yes.
Got it. And where do you think the speaker is on this?
I know that the speaker supports the merits of the bill.
Okay.
But it is the end of the year, so the session is almost over. And I know that there's so many other people that are trying to get their bills through, so I'm not sure if this is a top priority for the speaker at this moment.
But I imagine you'd be just as if you got a commitment, hey, we're going to have a hearing and then call a vote. And, if you have the votes pass this bill in January or February, it's not like you're not interested in it happening then, right?
Yeah.
You'll take the win whenever you can get
Absolutely.
it.
So I think that's where a bit of my strategy is turning to. So the session ends at the end of this year, and then I have to reintroduce the bill at the top of next year, get some of the new members to sign on. And it also gives me time to build a larger coalition of folks that would be more supportive publicly about pushing this bill.
Of the members who have, so I guess the 22 that have not yet signed on to the bill formally, is it worth trying to make this an issue? I mean, because they are all up for election, right? In 4 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. Is it worth trying to make it an issue in their campaign to sort of box them in on it?
I don't think so. I think that we're seeing a red wave in New York that has been impacting all of our elections from federal down to city, and I don't want to jeopardize any of my colleagues, especially Democratic colleagues' chances of winning in some of these contentious races. But I am hoping that their tenants within their districts, their constituencies, are speaking up and advocating for them to be potential co-sponsors on this piece of legislation.
Yeah, right. Even if they privately commit to groups, they may back out on it, but there's definitely value, right? Because some of them will stick to their word. So one of the things that I found really interesting about the bill is, to me, the city has long ignored, and I don't think it's just more a sin of omission rather than commission, but I think a demographic that's really useful, which is people who move here in their 20s from anywhere else in the world, right? And they tend to be people who are young and ambitious and excited to be here and smart and hardworking, and they have big ideas, and they're really exactly what we want. And their healthcare costs are low. They've consumed very few social services. Typically not a lot of law enforcement costs or issues around them. Their taxes get deducted from their paycheck every 2 weeks, so they're reliable taxpayers. They spend all their disposable money, back into the city's economy, nightlife and bars and entertainment and all of that. So the ROI is incredibly high, and yet I have yet to see, and this includes the guy that I revere and worked for, Mike Bloomberg, any politician ever, maybe before you, sort of say, hey, we should pay attention to these guys. Why is that?
Why are we not paying attention to them?
Why did it take you to do this? I mean, I get that you're of that age, but it seems like so obvious to me.
I think that especially in terms of the fiscal future of the city, we need to be looking towards every single solution that could provide a return on investment for New Yorkers, and we should be looking towards that population and making the city welcoming for them and affordable for them. At the same time that we should continue making the city affordable for people who grew up here, right? Who are being pushed out of their communities, and not even just people coming to the business world, but young people in general. I mean, New York City, what makes New York, I think, as interesting as it is a lot of the creatives and artists and people that were traditionally able to live in the city as starving artists who are now turning to other cities to move to, right?
Right. I mean, look, the people coming here to work at J.P. Morgan or McKinsey, they can afford the burger fee, right?
Absolutely.
So that's not really, even to me, you're not even really losing those residents. It's all the people who have maybe something more interesting that they want to do than be a management consultant or investment banker who could, will most of them end up probably moving back somewhere else eventually? Sure. But will some of them become lifelong New Yorkers? Yes. And will a few of them create something, whether it's business or art or whatever it is, that then really makes the city a better place? Absolutely. And they're the ones who are really getting deterred from moving here because, again, if we just use that sort of $5,000 rent as a baseline, you got to come up with basically almost an extra 10 grand in cash just to pay it. If McKinsey is paying it for you or giving you a giant bonus, you can handle it. But it's all the people who can't are the ones that were losing their talent, right? And the diversity of those people is, I think, what's being sacrificed. So, given that a lot of your colleagues both do want to either help make New York more affordable for people who are already here or encourage sort of a wide diversity of people to come here, of those who haven't signed on to the bill yet, what do they not see?
I think that they see the potential of this bill and what's good about this bill. I think that there are powers that exist that are telling them to ignore what's going to be beneficial about this bill. Right. And that's why I really appreciated your op-ed, because this is such a big tent issue. I have brokers who are supportive of this bill. I have, tenants and working class folks who are supportive of this bill. This young, yuppie potential business community that wants to move here that's supportive of this bill. This is going to help people, right? And that should be the job of government. That's why I'm in government. And I think that I work with a lot of smart people, and I think they know that too. But, unfortunately, when some interests don't want something like this to come into fruition for some reason, some people turn a blind eye away from the potential of something good.
Right. Now, we know that ultimately if people, with the demographic we were just talking about, were active primary voters and things like city council races and mayoral races, obviously the math would change, but these tend to be people who are generally not super engaged politically in the system, which brings us to an issue that you and I have also talked about, which is mobile voting.
I love this.
So,
how's that going?
And basically, the first stage of it is we funded elections in 7 states, 21 jurisdictions, where either deployed military or people with disabilities voted in real elections on their phones. Votes counted, turnout more than on average doubled. City of Denver did a poll of people who participated. Not so shockingly, 100% said they preferred mobile voting to having to go somewhere or do something. National Cybersecurity Center audited all of the elections, all came back clean. But I got a lot of shit from the cybersecurity community, the paper ballot people saying, no, it can never be safe. So we built our own. And we are 3 years.
The paper ballot community?
Yeah, there is. Like verified voting and citizen action, amazingly.
Right.
As by the way, they sort of hold up paper ballots as nirvana. Do they not remember Bush v. Gore and the Iraq War and the million people who died in the war and the $2 trillion wasted?
In our climate.
And our climate. Yeah, right. I mean, it's funny. We had a discussion the other day on the podcast about, I was arguing that one of the bigger what-ifs of history and tragedies is Bush v. Gore, because we would probably be in a totally different place on climate change right now if Al Gore had been president, because he was the only one that really took it seriously and understood it back
at
then.
that time.
Yeah, and the compounding effect in either, right, we've had a compounding effect in a negative direction. We could have had a compounding effect in a positive direction.
Paper ballots.
Yeah, that's the cause of it, right? So we're building our own. We're about 7/8 of the way done, and we're going to release it early next year, and we're going to make it free and open source. So anybody who wants to use it, I'm doing this out of my foundation. This is not a business thing for me in the slightest. But it seems to me that the only way to ultimately win is for you guys, meaning people of your generation, especially activists and advocates, to demand it. Right? We need basically. When the powers that be say, oh, no, you can't have it because it's not secure, because they can't say, we don't want more people to vote. Even in Texas and Georgia, when they restricted voting rights, they never said, we don't want black people to vote. They said security and integrity, these bullshit buzzwords.
It's such a lazy answer.
Yeah.
I think, our country is a young country, and it's ever changing, and we've seen so much change within our society alongside the changing of our government. So should voting, right? And so should the medium in which we vote. I think this is an excellent cause that you were taking
Thank
up.
you. So, it's basically, we're just taking vote. All we really did is we built the vote by mail system digitally. That's it.
Are you the first to do this?
I think so,
States?
yeah. There are a few startups that were working on it, but I think that the reality is I was lucky enough personally to have the resources just because of my day job in venture capital to invest enough money to build something truly different and truly secure. And then we're going to have to pass legislation over the objections of the system, right? You want to bring the two parties together, make it easier to take away power. Like I used to be Chuck Schumer's communications director. If I went to Chuck and said, hey, Chuck, here are 25 issues you said you're for. They're all more likely to happen if we have mobile voting. His only response would be, I'm not making it easier for AOC to primary me. And that would be his only comment, right?
Crazy.
So we're going to have to overcome that.
I thought you would receive more pushback from the right or from the
Republican,
right?
For sure. I think so. And look, I think ultimately if it does happen, or it eventually will happen because technology always eventually wins, it'll be sequential. So maybe you're starting with state and local primaries in blue states, which, by the way, great. That would, if we go back to the issue of this podcast, which is your bill, if mobile voting existed and young people could vote on their phones, their turnout would be exponentially higher. And instead of having 29 co-sponsors, you'd probably have 39 co-sponsors or 49 co-sponsors. And the reason that REBNY can bully some of your colleagues into not doing this is because they say that the people who they'd be helping in large part aren't going to vote in the primary anyway, right? So do you mind if I hit a few other local issues just to get
Absolutely.
your take on
Let's dive in.
Local Law 11, the scaffolding. this one really confuses me, right?
Okay.
Because no one really seems to like the vast amounts of scaffolding
Right.
around New York City. Talking to Alvin Bragg, he was talking about how there's like a higher incidence of crime under scaffolding, makes people feel unsafe. And like, at least with your bill, there is a powerful political constituency in Redmond on the other side. So at least it is politically logical. Wrong, but politically logical. The crazy thing with Local Law 11 is I can't even identify who's in favor of keeping it, and yet this bill that costs New Yorkers, same thing, and probably, by the way, would help with affordable housing costs, hundreds of millions of dollars a year, just exists. What can we do about it?
About scaffolding?
Yeah, like what? How do we get rid of this?
I think that I have some colleagues within the council, Councilmember Abreu, Councilmember Powers, who are definitely more well versed on
I've
this
talked.
subject.
Keith has
right?
come on this podcast. We've talked about it.
I love their advocacy from it. I am a Brooklyn council member, and even though like some of my votes and where I co-sponsor on bills definitely affects the greater city, scaffolding is not an issue that I hear a lot of within Brooklyn. But I think that what they're doing is great. I know that the mayor is in partnership with them on getting rid of scaffolding.
Especially when, again, you can use drones to do the inspection at a fraction of the cost without all of the inconvenience.
The mayor loves drones.
Yeah, the mayor loves drones. And so, that one, the illegal weed shops.
Okay.
What do you think about it? And like how, from my view, but I strongly support legalization of recreational cannabis. It's not the question. But I also think that we asked all of these people to go through a legal process. They put in a lot of time and money to do so. And then we have screwed them over completely by allowing this totally unregulated market that doesn't collect taxes, so their product is cheaper. And it's killing the legal market. What should we do about it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is another problem that, like the city, as being a city elected official, we have so many issues with the MTA, but then the MTA is a state agency. So there's a lot of obstacles that play a role into that. That's the same issue that we're seeing when it comes to this marijuana problem, right? Marijuana was legalized and is legalized through a state agency, OCM, as you know. And something that OCM didn't really give much thought into was the enforcement behind, illegal weed shops. And I think it's because marijuana is a very, very touchy and racial subject within this country, nonetheless, New York City. And I think that there was a blind eye turned to what enforcement of illegal weed shops would look like. I definitely always want to look to the state on the enforcement, that they are actually beefing up and making sure that some of these shops are closed down. The city has their hands tied when it comes to the type of enforcement that we could make the NYPD do, or other city agencies like DCWP, when it comes to shutting some of these shops down, because they'll get a summons, they'll get a ticket, but in 3 months they'll still be selling the same product within their stores.
And I understand the notion of if let's say there's as many as they estimate 8,000 illegal shops. If there were 8,000 small, struggling business owners who were just trying to make a living, like, okay, I guess you could, but there's no way that's the case, because they all look exactly alike. Like, there's no way this is an organized crime.
Have you seen some of the names of them? It's like the ugliest shops ever, too. They're not.
Yeah, right. Because it's just, I bet there's like literally like a turnkey solution, because it's like a couple of people who probably own the vast majority of them, and those are criminals, right? Those are not anyone that we should be sympathetic to. Now, I will say, let's say Eric Adams just said, you know what? The state has been completely incompetent on this. I don't think even the governor would say that OCM has in any way been an effective or competent agency whatsoever. It's mind-blowing how incompetent that they've been. And the mayor said, you know what? This is having a huge impact on my city, on kids getting access to legal weed, the substances themselves being unlicensed and uninspected. So there's anything from lead in them to fentanyl potentially. And so I'm just going to padlock all of them. And if the state doesn't like it, too bad. Do something about it. If the mayor did that tomorrow, what would be your reaction?
Oh, wow. That's quite the scenario. I think that would be really interesting to see how that would take place. As a New Yorker, and not as an elected official, I think that would kind of be exciting to see how that would turn out in terms of how the governor would respond, especially in their relationship with that. But
My gut is
I don't
that if you did
like a lot of these shops.
Right.
I think they're ugly. I think a lot of them are opening up by our schools. They're trying to sell products that look like they're kid friendly or for
Well,
children.
so you're a Friends Seminary graduate,
Yes.
and I'm very familiar with that school. And
I
there
started vaping in high school. The Juul was like popping up around.
Right.
Right?
So
I
that
remember
health food store across the street used to sell
Yeah.
Juul to kids. And I was talking to Bo about this the other day. There's a shop, I don't know how often you're still back by the school, but right on 3rd and 16th, so basically right by
The smelly deli?
Right by, next to the deli and next to Joe Jr.'s.
That's what it's called. That's what it's called.
Yeah. I have kids there that eat there every day. There's a weed shop, right? And like
There is.
Yeah. And,
I didn't know
and
that.
Bo's like, sure that they're selling to his students,
Yeah.
right? So like it's clearly, there's no world in which this isn't
Yeah.
going to kids. And if you're licensed, you're far less likely to sell to kids simply because you're worried about losing your life. Even if you have
Right.
no morals,
Right.
just purely the economics of it, or you wouldn't do it. So a tougher one in
Yeah.
that just not great solutions, but the migrant crisis. If there were legislation before you and the council that said, you know what, the feds are useless. We're just going to create a New York City work permit, and if you are here as a migrant,
Yeah.
rather than us paying to house you and feed you and you sitting around all day, you came here because you wanted to work. There are industries like hospitality and healthcare that need employees.
Right.
And then you can actually become a tax-paying citizen rather than someone consuming resources that should be
Right.
going to schools or whatever
Absolutely.
else. How would you feel about a bill like
I
that?
would be supportive of that. I think that a lot of people have a misconception that migrants and immigrants are going to harm our economy, but we've actually seen
We need them.
a turnaround to our economy when we support immigration and the services that allows people to immigrate peacefully. I will say that is a solution that I would definitely support, but even just speaking in the current day, I think the city could be doing a lot more to look towards increasing our revenue. One of them being passing the FAIR Act and allowing younger people to be able to move into the city that work within the business field, but also by instituting a pied-à-terre tax for people who own apartments and homes within New York City but don't live here. Vacancy taxes on multiple businesses that are holding out within our city. Also, I know that the city's owed a lot of money through contractors and through work that we have done. If we hired 50 auditors within the Department of Finance, the turnaround rate of receiving some of that money could increase by a decent amount that would help us support this crisis. I mean, there's so many things that the city should be doing rather than complaining about the crisis at hand, but I do think that if there were something that the city could do in authorizing work permits, through our power, I think that was something I could be supportive of.
Unquestionably, it would go to court, and hard to know how a federal
Just
court
like our city, our vote.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, why not try? Because the status quo. I mean, the mayor has been very clear the status quo is bankrupting us, right? So, like, I guess this is a little bit of my concern with the administration so far. And I like the mayor personally, and I do think that he wants to do good things. But there are these issues that you could choose to take action on, like the weed shops, like a New York City work permit, that you have endless excuses to not do it, right? You can blame whoever, or you can just act. And at the end of the day, you're here to get things done, right? That's the point of serving in office. And I don't see that really happening at City Hall.
I completely agree, and I think that's a frustration that I've been having in the 2 years that I've been in office. Like I remember coming into office, youngest member of the city council, no prior experience in government, and I had this imposter syndrome of coming in, right? Will I be able to do the job? Most especially like within the purview of serving my constituents. And now 2 years in, very comfortable in serving my constituents and knowing my community and knowing how to navigate the city agencies. But I'm really having a hard time as a person and as someone that works as a legislator and someone in power with the red tape and the roadblocks and the lack of will sometimes to make some of these creative decisions, right? Even if they may get shot down by the courts in the future, I feel like people have given up before even trying within this field of government. I hate being told that there's only so much that we can do. I hate being told that there are so many limitations to what we as people in power can do before even trying to do those things. So what you just said really speaks to me, because it's a frustration that I've been dealing with, I guess, going into like my sophomore, junior year of now being an elected official. But it's something that I frequently see, especially with people who have been within government for a long period of time. We need creative solutions for these diverse problems that we are dealing with.
And to bring it full circle, if we made it easier and cheaper to live here because we didn't charge these completely outlandish rental brokers fees, we would get more talented people, a lot of whom would want, or some of whom would want to work in city government, and that would enable us to sort of have a higher quality government and make people's lives better.
Absolutely. Perspective is everything, and people need a different perspective in order to change what's happening in our city, especially the problems that seem ingrained within our system.
Right. Well, Chief, thanks for taking on this issue. I'm a big fan of it. You have all my support wherever you need for it, and let's get it passed.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cool.